Welcome to this explainer. I want you to just take a second and imagine something with me. Imagine spending a quiet, peaceful night inside a small cabin completely surrounded by the dense forests of Northern California. Everything is totally normal. Nothing seems unusual. There are no screams breaking the silence. There is no obvious warning of danger, right? There's absolutely no reason to believe that by morning, this unassuming little cabin would become the center of one of America's most disturbing unsolved murder cases. Today, we're examining a case that has literally baffled experts for decades. This is the story of the Keddie Cabin Murders, a terrible mystery and a truth that, honestly, has never been fully established. Okay, let's dive into this. The setting was Keddie, California, a really small mountain community in Plumas County. It was the kind of place where people went to escape, to get away from the noise and chaos of the city. We're talking about an area heavily surrounded by towering trees, imposing mountains, and isolated roads. But inside Cabin 28, something happened that investigators would struggle to explain for decades. A completely quiet night was shattered. And what exactly took place during those dark hours? Well, it remains one of the most haunting mysteries in American true crime. Section 1. Terror in Cabin 28. To truly grasp this mystery, we have to start at the beginning, going all the way back to 1981 and looking at the events that turned a totally ordinary night into an inexplicable tragedy. So, in 1981, Cabin 28 was occupied by members of the Sharp family. Inside, you had Sue Sharp, her children, and a few other young people visiting. And among those inside the cabin was 12-year-old Tina Sharp. Now, the night appeared perfectly ordinary as everyone settled in, just a family hanging out. But sometime during those dark hours, the situation inside that cabin changed completely. What happened next is something nobody could have ever anticipated. The following morning, the peaceful facade of Keddie was literally torn away. The cabin was discovered in absolutely horrifying circumstances. Three people were dead inside: Sue Sharp, John Sharp, and Dana Wingate. Of course, the scene immediately triggered a major criminal investigation, with local authorities rushing in to secure the terrifying cabin and start piecing together what on earth happened the night before. Section 2. The missing 12-year-old. While investigators were grappling with this incredibly complex triple homicide, they quickly realized the nightmare wasn't just contained to the victims they'd found. A whole new, deeply disturbing problem was emerging. The crime scene presented this baffling, almost impossible contrast. On one hand, 3 victims had been brutally murdered. Yet on the other hand, perhaps one of the most unsettling aspects of the whole case is that other children were reportedly in the cabin at night, and they survived unharmed. The murders happened inside the exact same building. This created this extraordinary question for the authorities, right? How could 3 people be killed inside such a small cabin while others, literally right nearby, remained completely alive? The answer was not immediately clear at all. But the survival of those children led to an even more chilling realization. Sue Sharp's 12-year-old daughter, Tina, was nowhere to be found. A 12-year-old girl had just disappeared. This single fact entirely transformed the investigation. Think about it. Investigators had to ask themselves, was Tina another victim whose body had been hidden? Had she somehow managed to escape into the dark woods? Or had someone intentionally taken her from the cabin? Suddenly, they had 2 major mysteries to solve, and practically 0 answers. So investigators are now staring down this massive, multi-layered mystery. First, secure a highly chaotic and horrifying crime scene. Second, solve the murders of Sue, John, and Dana. And finally, locate missing 12-year-old Tina. It was an incredibly complicated task. Search teams were relentlessly looking through the surrounding area. Investigators chased down leads, questioning anyone and everyone connected to the case. But as clues and theories started piling up alongside a growing list of suspects, a definitive answer kept eluding them. Tina was just gone. Section 3. Theories, myths, and suspects. Days passed. Those days turned into weeks, and eventually, the trail began to grow colder. But you know how it goes. In the absence of solid answers, widespread speculation takes over. So, the crucial point is remembering the difference between a theory and actual proof. A theory is just an idea used to account for a situation. Proof, on the other hand, is evidence establishing a fact, and that distinction is absolutely vital in any true crime story. The Keddie murders have attracted countless theories over the decades, for sure, but the actual identity of the killer or killers has never been conclusively established in a court of law. There are pieces of the puzzle, sure, but they just don't form a complete picture. Just think about the physical setting for a second. A small cabin, a remote mountain community, a pitch-black night, 3 victims, and a missing child. The setting itself created this deeply eerie atmosphere around the case. Over the years, stories started circulating, describing Cabin 28 as unsettling, and people even started connecting the case with paranormal theories. But let's be absolutely clear here. There is zero established evidence proving that ghosts or supernatural forces were responsible for the murders. This was a real criminal investigation. The true mystery, and the true horror, comes from unanswered human questions surrounding real people, not from ghost stories. Over the years, investigators cast a massive net. They looked at suspects who might have had direct connections to the victims. They dug into complex personal conflicts and relationships within the community. There were even deep dives into theories about random outsiders or transients just wandering into the cabin that night. But again, suspicion is not proof, and without proof, securing any sort of court conviction remained completely impossible. Section 4. A haunting cold reality. As the years relentlessly passed, the urgency of those initial days inevitably faded. This became one of California's most famous and, frankly, most frustrating cold cases. The original investigators moved on, memories faded, and this agonizing wait for answers just settled over the devastated family left behind. Let's move to the timeline and see how this builds. Starting in 1981 with the murders and Tina's disappearance, we see how the search grew incredibly cold over the following weeks. Then, years later, a major development. Human remains were discovered and eventually connected to Tina. Yet, as we push decades later into the present day, the actual identity of the killer still remains a total unknown. Now, the discovery of Tina's remains was monumental. It finally answered one major question. Tina Sharp had not simply disappeared to start a new life somewhere else. But instead of solving the entire mystery, it just created another deeply painful question. Was her death connected directly to what happened inside the cabin? Even with her remains found, the mystery surrounding her disappearance remained deeply troubling and completely unresolved. You might be wondering, why does a case like this stay unsolved for decades? Well, over time, physical evidence naturally deteriorates. Memories become harder to verify as witnesses age, and key individuals pass away. Sometimes investigators simply do not have enough tangible evidence to prove what they strongly suspect. There's this massive gap between suspicion and proof, and that gap is exactly where the Keddie Cabin mystery remains trapped today. Today, Keddie is not the same place it was in 1981, but the story of Cabin 28 lives on. 3 people lost their lives. A young girl was taken and later found dead. And decades later, the questions still remain. True crime researchers continue examining the evidence, and investigators continue looking for answers. There might be an explanation out there somewhere, but until convincing evidence emerges, it remains unsolved. Because ultimately, the most frightening mysteries aren't the ones with monsters. They're the ones involving real people, real victims, and answers that never came. Every cold case leaves behind a story, and sometimes just the smallest overlooked clue can change everything in an instant. We've walked through the timeline, the theories, and that agonizing lack of proof. So I want to leave you with this final central thought to consider. Who entered Cabin 28? Who attacked the victims? Why was Tina taken? Ultimately, what do you think happened inside Cabin 28 that night? If you want to explore more real unsolved cases from America and around the world, make sure to keep seeking out the facts, because understanding the past is the only way to find answers for the future.